correct me. You're watching Blazing Saddles with your 6-year-old, right?
No, I'm actually watching The Godfather now. Hey, I got to show him good stuff.
That's right. Stick to the classics.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and, of course, what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 271. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. Welcome to those of you who are new to the show, just checking us out for the first time. Hope you enjoy what you hear and you'll come back. Today we've got a variety show. What that means is that all the members of our cast, Sergeant Bill Sylvia, Mia Anstein, and Pastor John Bennett will be providing us with some excellent content today. Before we begin that, though, I do want to give a shout out to the awesome men and women who make this show possible. The members of the Reformation Gun Club. And this week, I want to recognize Brian from Riverton, Wyoming, JJ from Toms River, New Jersey, Scott from Granville, Ohio, Turbo 1889, Stephen from New Bern, North Carolina, Tamara from Durant, Oklahoma, and William from Duncanville, Texas. Thank you all so much for your support. We really do appreciate it. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means that we rely on people like the people that I just mentioned and many others who put their money where their mouth is and support the show, make sure that we're able to do this every week. We do not have any advertisers. We don't have any sponsors. This is as much of an advertisement as you're going to hear during the show today. If you would like to find out more, if you would like to support the show, find out about all the benefits, all the hundreds of hours of exclusive content, the invitations to monthly online hangouts, access to our cool new website, and our members-only podcast that we now release every week, be sure to check it out. For as little as $1 a month, you can help make all this happen. Check it out at armedlutheran.us/gun club, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any other episode. All right. Now, today is Father's Day, or I guess as it's more properly known, it's Non-Birthing Person Day. So happy Non-Birthing Person Day to all of you. Screw that. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers and the fathers-to-be in the audience. If it weren't for you, none of us would be here. And we really do appreciate everything that you do for the lives of your children. And we are certainly thankful that you're listening today. We hope you have a great day with your loved ones. As I said today is, as I said earlier, today is a variety show with content from the entire cast. And I had almost forgotten that this was Non-Birthing Persons Day, so my apologies to the cast for that. We'll be using the content that you provided for episode 273 instead, and today we're going to be providing you, our listeners, with some classic segments from the Grooveyard of Forgotten Favorites from previous Father's Day episodes. So sit back with your pop, your dad, your pater, your old man, just don't call him a non-birthing person, whatever you do call him. Enjoy today's show, and I will talk to you again next week.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey there, hi there, guys. I hope that you had a wonderful Father's Day weekend. Unfortunately, I lost my dad to cancer. So, dear dads, please, here's a big tip to you. Please go get your health checkups so that you can catch things before they become a little too advanced for any treatment. On that note, I wanted to share some tips because I was very close to my dad. I was a daddy's girl. I still am a daddy's girl, even though he's not here anymore. I wanted to tell you about the importance of a dad in a young woman's life. It has been proven over and over again. The statistics show that the percentages of women who are successful in their lives, they have had key influential men and their father figures as they were growing up. And so that is something that's very important. So dads, make sure that you spend time with your daughters and be a positive figure in their life, not a critical one. So always be reinforcing and positive. That doesn't mean that you need to let the kids run your life, but be an influential figure and always be there. One thing about my childhood was that I grew up in a rural area. My dad had firearms. He's the one who introduced me to guns. He did so because my brother was about 5 years older than me. And when he taught my brother how to shoot, he knew that I would see this going on and I'd become curious. And I know I've talked a little bit about this in past episodes, but I need to tell you again, and especially hopefully we have some new listeners since then, but I was 5 years old when he taught me how to shoot my brother's pellet gun, and he taught me safety. He taught me the importance of how to use the gun and also what they were for, and basically that they weren't toys. So I knew at a very young age, back then, we didn't even have our guns locked up. I just knew they weren't toys. I knew that if I touched them, even if my dad didn't know, I was going to be in trouble. This is something of a respect issue that my dad had a great knack of putting that into us. So we were very safe with the guns and never had any incidents. And on that note, when I got older, when I was in middle school, my parents divorced. It could have been a tragic time in my life, but it wasn't. Our parents communicated to us. We understood. My mother and I, we moved to the big city of San Diego. When we moved there, it was a whole new world to me because going from this small country town to the big city, it was, somewhat exciting, somewhat scary, but also, it was a learning time, and something that I learned while I was there, I learned while I was walking home from school one day with my cousin. As we were walking around the corner on the way to the house, we saw this house that had police caution tape around it. And of course, we were very curious, being adolescent girls, we were going, what happened? All these things go through your mind. Well, what we find out later was that there were two of our friends. They were in that house, and one of them found the parents' gun, and they had not been taught what the guns were for. They had not been taught safety. They had not been taught the respect. The parents had instead chosen to hide the firearms from those kids. So unfortunately, what happened is they became curious. They had seen guns on television. They didn't know what they were for. The gun was, of course, grabbed. One child shot the other child, and that story ended in tragedy. That is when I realized how blessed I was that my father had empowered me with knowledge, and he had empowered me to know what firearms were for, what tools they were, not that they were toys, and also not that they were scary. He taught me respect for those guns. So, dads, empower your children. And of course, I said I'm a daddy's girl. Whether it's a daughter or a son, you've got to teach your kids. Don't hide things from them. Knowledge is power. So on this Father's Day weekend, I want to encourage you to empower your children. Find that appropriate time, that appropriate age. As I said, my brother was older. It was appropriate to teach me at 5 years old firearm safety and respect. So in your household, you will have to determine when the appropriate time is to teach them this wonderful gift of responsibility. On this weekend, please take that into consideration. If you haven't yet taught your child and you think they're old enough, take them to the range. We have wonderful weather this summer. Maybe you've got some cool mornings or evenings, and maybe you can start by showing them the Eddie Eagle program on NRA's website. Maybe you can start teaching them firearm safety at home with inert guns, stuff like that. There's a lot of ways to get them into shooting before you actually head out to the range. Maybe you'll want to have them come and watch you. I know Lloyd did that with his daughter. She got to do timer and other activities. So look to that as a way to empower your children, and always remember the rules of safety and head out there and enjoy your time with your children, because sometimes it means a big difference when they've grown up and moved out of the house, or in my situation, when my dad is gone. He's empowered me to reach out and help teach others, and I hope that you can do the same. Happy Father's Day.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, this is Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Wanted to do a Ballistic Minute about being a father and learning and teaching gun safety. So when I was growing up, there were no firearms in my home. My father was ex-military. He was very strict. He taught us safety with a lot of different things, but there were no guns in the house, so I didn't really get any firearms training or safety training or advice or anything until I was an adult. But now here I am with two small kids of my own, 5 and 7, and I've got to teach them how to respect firearms and what they're for and all that good stuff. So that's something that I do, and do it on a really often basis. My children, I try to demystify the firearms for them so that, they don't think that it's some big scary tool, which it is a tool and it can be scary, but so can a hammer or a wrench if you're not using it right in the wrong hands. We've gone over gun safety, pointing in a safe direction, keeping your finger off the trigger, how to handle them, how to take care of them, when to use them, when not to use them, what they're for, and all of that. My son has been out to the rifle range shooting a Ruger 1022 a few months ago, and he had a ball. He's been asking to go back ever since. And since school just got out for him a few weeks ago, that's probably coming up again here real soon. My daughter doesn't have as much interest, but she still learns all that she can as far as safety and handling. So whenever she feels like it's time for her to go to the range with Daddy, then that's what she'll do. I'm a big proponent of leading by example or teaching by example. So I know that I've always learned visually. This is the best way for me to learn. I see somebody do something, that I can do it just like them, or try to do it, try to emulate them. And that's something that I do with my job, with my life, and with my kids. I try to be the leader, be the parent, and be the responsible person that I want them to be. So practice gun safety. Make it more than just a habit when you're handling firearms. Make it a conscious effort. And teach your children. Start them out at whatever age you feel appropriate. And they'll learn, and they'll have a good appreciation and knowledge of firearms and firearm safety. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute. Happy Father's Day.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
So what is it that's so special about fathers? Well, if you ask anyone like my wife who lost their father recently, or really at any point, who have endured that loss, you'll find out exactly why fathers are so special. But given the views of fathers in society today, why are we still celebrating? Father's Day dates back to the Middle Ages. It started out with the Feast of St. Joseph, who was the earthly father of Christ. And that feast day is still celebrated in the Catholic tradition in March, on March 19th. Father's Day didn't make its way into sort of a general observance outside the Catholic tradition until the 20th century, 500 years later. It's now turned into a civic celebration to complement Mother's Day. It started in 1908 in a Methodist church in West Virginia following a tragic mining accident which claimed the lives of 361 miners and left behind over 1,000 fatherless children. That event, though, never really grew beyond that congregation. Attempts were made to establish celebrations in other places, Chicago, Washington State, Oregon. A bill was even proposed to create a national holiday in 1913. President Woodrow Wilson spoke at a Father's Day celebration in Washington State in 1916 and offered his support for a national holiday, but Congress decided they weren't interested. They resisted because they thought that the day would become too commercialized. President Coolidge said the day should be observed throughout the nation in 1924, but he didn't go so far as to make a proclamation to establish a national holiday. And then at that point, the idea kind of lost steam. It wasn't until the 1930s when a woman named Sonora Smart Dodd, returning to Spokane, Washington from her studies in Chicago, began to make a push to promote the idea of a celebration of fatherhood. She got help from manufacturers of products that are traditionally geared towards men, neckties, tobacco, pipes, those sorts of things. And in 1938, she teamed up with a major menswear retailers association to promote the idea nationwide. But it wasn't for another 20 years, till 1957, that Maine Senator Margaret Chase Smith wrote a proposal to create Father's Day as an official national holiday. 9 years after that, President Lyndon Johnson issued a presidential proclamation which established the third Sunday in June as Father's Day. It was finally made official in 1972 when a law was signed by President Richard Nixon. Given today's grievance culture, this next little bit of info might be enough to get Father's Day revoked. Who was Sonora Smart Dodd, the woman who fought for the creation of Father's Day in the 1920s and 1930s? Well, she was the daughter of a Confederate veteran who had raised her and her 5 siblings on his own. So thanks to the efforts of people like Sonora Smart Dodd, the daughter of the Confederacy, we now have a day to celebrate fathers. But with all that in mind, I ask again, what's the big deal? What is the big deal about fathers? The 4th commandment is the one commandment that we have that comes with a promise. Honor your father and your mother, that your days will be long in the land that the Lord is giving you. Luther wrote that there's no greater authority on earth than the authority of father and mother. To paraphrase Luther, to the estate of fatherhood and motherhood, God has given the distinction above all lower estates that he commands us not only to love our parents, but also to honor them. In this way, he sets fathers and mothers apart and distinguishes them above all persons on earth. Proverbs 15 says that a fool despises his father's instruction. Proverbs 23 counsels children to listen to their fathers. But in America today, it's increasingly difficult for children to honor their fathers or to receive proper instruction from them. In the U.S., in 2018, over 81% of single-parent families are headed by a single mother. 50% of those women were never married. Almost 2/3 of minority children are born out of wedlock, and 1/4, 25% of all children in the U.S. grow up without a father. In the nearly 50 years since the official creation of Father's Day, The sexual revolution and radical feminism, the media, have told us that fathers don't matter. Families come in all shapes, they tell us. 2 mommies, 2 daddies, no daddy, rent a daddy, whatever. It's all the same. Children are resilient. So why does Father's Day matter? Consider some more of these sobering stats. 26% of the women who are the heads of single-parent households, 26% of those women were jobless for all of 2018. Didn't have a job at all. Despite making up less than 15% of the population, blacks account for 1/3 of all single-mother households. And while just 6% of married households are living in poverty, 39% of single-mother families are poor. Kids growing up in single-parent families are almost 3 times as likely to be arrested than kids in intact families. They're also more than twice as likely to have committed assault. Based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the National Archive of Criminal Justice data, studies have found that the top 3 factors that correlate most strongly with gun homicide are growing up in a black community, not having a father present, and dropping out of high school. All of those things, the black community part isn't the blackness itself. It's the lack of the father that's the key. Kids don't drop out of high school if they have a strong father figure, strong parental guidance to keep them on the right track. The black community just happens to be, like we said earlier, 30 some odd percent, nearly 40% of single mother households are in the black community. According to the National Fatherhood Initiative, nearly 2/3 of African American children are raised in homes without a biological father present. That's compared to 33% of all children in America. We've gone from father knows best to fathers don't matter in a span of 50 years. A significant percentage of the perpetrators of this nation's deadliest mass killings were raised in broken homes. Luther wrote that when father and mother can no longer exercise control, either because government has assumed the role of the parent, or because parents aren't present or they're not willing to exercise what he calls their natural dominion over them, the hangman must take over. Governments, he said, are custodians of the 4th commandment, as a cat is to mice. God, he wrote, has commanded you to control your children. But if the father's not in the home to control the child, what ends up happening? But we don't want to look at that. We don't want to think about that. We'd rather blame guns. We'd rather blame the NRA. Modern militant feminism tells us that fathers are unimportant. Masculine behavior is being beaten out of our boys, derided and mocked as toxic. With no father at home and a vast majority of public school teachers being female, so our boys are growing up with no male role models. They're around women all the time. A large percentage of our kids, of our boys, are raised almost exclusively by women. So there's no one to teach them the positive traits of masculinity: bravery, assertiveness, risk-taking, standing up for the weak, protecting women. I know this. This is the world that I grew up in. I'm the product of a single-parent family, a single-mother family. I know the damage that's done to a child when their world falls apart, when the father leaves and there's no one, not a man anyway, to guide them through their formative years. It affects a young man for most of his life. Trust me, I know. To this day, it affects me. I can't look back fondly on memories with my dad. I don't have words of wisdom passed down to me from my dad that I can lean on or learn from or pass on to my own children. This is what the sexual revolution has brought us. Instead of men and women working together in complementary roles that were given to us by God, men now routinely walk away from their obligations and millions of women are left to raise their offspring alone, or, as society tells them, to abort their children because it would be better to kill them than to raise them in poverty or hardship. Children, lacking guidance from their father, turn to other father figures. Drugs, crime, gangs, ultimately, some of them depression, suicide, in some cases, mass murder. So what's the big deal about fathers? Why do we celebrate Father's Day? Fathers are the rock of the family, the provider, the protector, the defender, the teacher, the examples that children, young men especially, learn from and follow. And without their guidance and care, all we have to do, if we just open our eyes, is look, and we can see the results. Even if this corrupt world refuses to look, the results are all there for us to see for ourselves: poverty, depression, death. Like our Heavenly Father, our earthly fathers, to use Luther's words, console, strengthen, confirm, nourish, and favor us. This is why Father's Day is more important than ever. As the role of fathers in America is diminished, the importance of fathers in the family are more important than ever. So to all the faithful fathers in our audience, from everyone here at Armed Lutheran Radio, I want to wish you a very happy Father's Day.
It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Hey folks, this is Pastor John Bennett. And this Father's Day, reflecting on my experiences growing up, I really didn't have much exposure to firearms whatsoever when I was a child. The most exposure I ever had is when, snooping in my parents' closet, I managed to find my father's unsecured Ruger Security 6. Now, fortunately, I at least had the good sense not to play around with it, but all my childhood, from that point forward, from time to time, whenever I had the notion, I would just go in and take a peek at it because, hey, I was a kid and I thought it was neat. Now, what I've learned from this as a parent myself is the importance of securing my firearms and preventing my own children from unauthorized access to them. Now, aside from that, I've had more exposure to firearms with my father-in-law than I ever did with my own dad. My father-in-law, for an ordination gift, he handed down to me his Marlin lever action 30-30 as an ordination gift. Something that I will treasure for the rest of my life and hand down to my own son. When I reflect on just the joy that I've had in shooting with my father-in-law and talking guns with him and that sort of thing, it really is a tremendous joy. And that is a joy that I intend to pass down to my own children as I have the joy of teaching my daughters and my son to shoot and introducing them to firearm safety and the like, so that I can give my own children the experience that I didn't have but should have as a child myself. A very blessed Father's Day to all of you, and happy Father's Day, Dad.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.